In closing, robots and the hard enough problem of consciousness. As promised in Class A, we don't mean to write off the hard problem entirely. It's an important conceptual problem to think about. Like Crick, though, we aren't sure if tackling it head-on is the right approach. It could be strategically wiser to wait until we have sorted out some basic facts, like the NCC, for example. But in line with our approach to compare ideas rather than to find unequivocal proof for one single view, we can consider an easier variant of the hard problem, which we here call the hard enough problem. The challenge is this. Let's say a theory posits that consciousness is the result of X. We try to imagine the simplest mechanical implementation of X. And then we ask the proponents of the theory, do you mean that this simple thing is conscious too? And if they insist that the theory is right, then they'll have to say yes. The challenge is not about providing a satisfactory explanation, one that bridges the subjective and the objective. That might just be too hard for now. Every current proposed theory fails. Instead, it's more like a game of chicken, testing whether they dare to accept the consequences of their theory all the way. I mean, they're going to look a little bit ridiculous after saying that that simple creation is conscious. For example, some people may say that consciousness is a matter of the mathematical properties of our brain networks. When things are connected in certain ways, they're conscious. So far, so good, because the human brain is a very complicated network. When we are anesthetized, the connections between the different brain regions may be shut off, so the network complexity goes down. So in the brain, there is a sense that network complexity could correlate with consciousness, at least to some extent. But as a theory, proponents will have to meet this challenge. If we connect simple logic gates together, making sure that they meet the proposed mathematical criteria of complexity, are we going to say that these logic gates together are conscious? And what if those logic gates aren't connected to the sensors giving them input? Interestingly enough, some researchers have acknowledged that, yes, a set of these inactive logic gates could be considered conscious because of their theoretical commitments. This is what is called a panpsychist position. That is, the view that consciousness may exist in physical systems in general, regardless of whether or not they give rise to mental processes. Some panpsychists think that even a single atom could be conscious to a certain extent. Understandably, cognitive neuroscientists are generally not very impressed by these views. But what about the local theories? They're advocated by some cognitive neuroscientists too. They say having the right kind of activity in the visual cortex is all you need to have subjective experiences of seeing. But what if we surgically cut out the visual cortex and put it on a petri dish? What if we provided it with nutrients to keep it alive and then electrically stimulated the neurons to generate the exact kind of activity that happens during conscious seeing? Would that piece of brain tissue, disconnected from the rest of the brain, be conscious? Some localists are actually willing to go that far, to bite the bullet and acknowledge that that's what their theory would say. This is what is so interesting about the hard enough problem. It really pushes theorists to extreme positions. Okay, well then what about the global theories? They say that consciousness is a matter of global broadcast, when information is centrally shared in a network of modules. What about a network of simple computers? If we were to hook them up together with a central workspace, and then a piece of information is broadcast through that workspace so that every single computer can access it, does that mean that that piece of information is conscious for that network? And remember, this is an exercise in comparing the different theories. The first and foremost criterion should be whether or not the theory has empirical support in clear cases like the human brain. But to the extent that a theory passes that criterion somewhat, we should try to see what they say in response to the hard enough problem. Which claim to consciousness looks more ridiculous? A central network for sharing information between many computers, or a set of inactive logic gates not receiving any inputs for computing? Which one is more likely to have nothing to do with consciousness, if you had to guess? Now then, what does the perceptual reality monitoring theory say? We can build a very simple robot with a rational decision system. The system represents what it believes, constraining how the robot acts in general. And the robot has to be capable of predictive coding, So the sensors can be activated by external information as well as endogenously via top-down mechanisms. So the robot needs to have some adversarial discriminators to tell the rational system what the sensors really represent when they are activated. How ridiculous would it be to say that this robot has subjective experiences like we do? Well, the robot will believe what the sensors say, as interpreted by the adversarial discriminator. Let's say that there is a sensor for detecting damage to the body. If that sensor misfires a signal due to endogenous noise and the adversarial discriminator makes a mistake and thinks that that signal reflects real bodily damage, the robot will have the unshakable belief that its body is being damaged. Even if the other sensors and background information suggest that the body is totally fine, it won't be able to reason this dreadful belief away. Is this experience close enough to conscious pain as we feel it? The perceptual reality monitoring theory says yes. It would be easy to imagine it being wrong. Maybe such a robot would be like a zombie. But the question is not whether it could be wrong. The question is whether a theory is conceptually more problematic than the other existing theories. Are there other theories that account for the existing experimental evidence just as well, but would end up saying something less ridiculous when challenged by the hard enough problem? Well, if you can think of one, let me know. That'd be great.